Well, for more on that, we'll cross to our correspondent in Kyiv, Gulliver Cragg. Good morning, Gulliver. So what is the situation in Soledar right now?
Well, of course, it's hard to know for sure, but the Ukrainians are still saying that they have not lost control of this town. It's really quite a small town, it's worth underlining, just 10,000 inhabitants. The Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said yesterday that areas were changing hands all the time. The situation was fluid. There was this picture that emerged showing some Russian combatants, apparently members of the Wagner mercenary group, apparently in the center of Soledar, but the Ukrainians have said that they do not, the Russians, have control of the whole of the town. The fighting is still going on. Reportedly, it's very intense fighting, and of course not just in Soledar, but also in neighboring Bakhmut. The Russian offensive on that city continues as well, though there have been reports that the Russians have been using less artillery rounds than they habitually were in recent weeks, though the Americans' assessment of how many artillery rounds the Russians are using differs widely from the Ukrainians' assessment. The Ukrainians claim that the Russians are firing much more at them than the American intelligence say that they are, but in any case, all agree that the fighting is extremely intense, and on the Ukrainian side and on the side of its allies, no one is saying that Ukraine has yet lost Soledar.
So, Gulliver, how important, as we await more information on control of the city, how important is it for Ukrainians?
Well, as you were saying, Soledar may be important for the Russians' ongoing attempts to capture Bakhmut, but that attempt to capture Bakhmut has been going on for more than 7 months now without success, and Soledar has really been involved from the beginning. It was back in May that the salt mining company in Soledar said that it had come under shelling. At the end of the spring, it ceased production. It's that salt mine that is, as it were, the prize in Soledar. It's the reason why this very small town is in some way of economic significance to Ukraine. Almost all the salt that was sold in Ukraine until very recently came from there. Until a few years ago, they were also exporting to Russia in very large quantities. I believe it's the largest salt mine in Europe, and the assessment is that 95% of the salt down there has not yet been extracted. So potentially it is in some way an economic prize, but I mean, it's not a coal mine, it's not an oil field. I don't think that the economic prize is really that significant. Probably for both sides, the symbolic significance for the Russians of it taking control of at least some locality that's bigger than a village at this stage could perhaps be a very big boost for their morale. For the Ukrainians, of course, it's symbolically important to resist. It's important to hold Soledar in order to keep on holding Bakhmut. And also, what some Ukrainians have been saying very bluntly is that the tactics the Russians are using in their attempts to take Bakhmut and Soledar, pushing so many men forward into what they call the meat grinder, is simply offering an opportunity for the Ukrainians to inflict heavy losses on the Russian side, meaning that the Russians have got less forces available for defending places like the occupied areas of Zaporizhia region, for example.
Gulliver Cragg in Kyiv, thank you very much.